And welcome back as we continue focusing on events in Europe and how they're impacting Africa. Nigeria has forbidden its citizens from enlisting to fight in Ukraine. This follows reports of alleged recruitment of volunteers in the country to fight on the side of Ukraine. The country has been under siege from Russian forces for more than 2 weeks now. Nigeria's foreign ministry says the Ukrainian embassy has denied any role in the alleged exercise, but the embassy has confirmed that a number of Nigerians have approached it, indicating willingness to join the war. The embassy also distanced itself from claims that it's requesting $1,000 from each Nigerian volunteer for an air ticket and visa. This comes days after Senegal warned against volunteers enlisting to fight against Russians in Ukraine. It also ordered the Ukrainian ambassador to take down a Facebook post calling on Senegalese volunteers to enlist to the war. We speak now with Ovigwe Eguegu, who is an international geopolitical security analyst based in Abuja, Nigeria. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. If there wasn't evidence of at least these claims, it would be deemed bizarre, or is it?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, when it comes to the open call for recruits all over the world, what the Ukrainian government has done has been very smart. So rather than put out maybe like official press release in front of press within the countries, what they've been using has been social media. So for instance, in Nigeria, for instance, it was social media. Senegal was social media, particularly Facebook. Even Nigeria was also Facebook. In South America, the same thing. So it's a way to sort of put themselves in a position where they can. I was even expecting them to deny that maybe their Facebook accounts were hacked or something, but that denial from the embassy is a bit low because, of course, it's a phenomenon that is happening all over the globe, and it just goes to show that they have realized that it was a very, very unconscionable move that they shouldn't have done, because several countries in the continent already are not in support of Ukraine's position on the issue. I mean, some countries abstain from it, trying to protect their own national interests and remain independent. So to see Ukraine go on to do this sort of open mass recruitment without consulting with the respective government, I think was a bit tacky.
Well, I mean, there's the irony of the fact that a lot of African citizens, students who are stuck in Ukraine, being prevented from boarding trains or any transportation to reach borders to escape the conflict. So one then begs the question, are there double standards? There have been suggested, not only in viewing the importance, the prominence of the Ukraine war, but using what some have described Africans as human shields.
Well, I will even go for that to say it's a form of exploitation in and of itself, because you can't tolerate this. You can't tolerate these people or treat them as human beings enough to accord them the due regards under international law as refugees of war in your country. But at the same time, you want these same people to fight for that country. It's a bit hypocritical. It is condemnable, and that is why, if you notice, the narrative on the continent has shifted against the Ukrainian government. So initially, with the initial, Russian move into Ukraine, several people on social media, were a bit supportive of, Ukrainians. But immediately, those reports started surfacing from the Ukraine Polish border that Africans are being discriminated against. Of course, we started seeing that sort of goodwill fade away. And then when that was followed by the open call for recruitment from African countries, without any consultation with government, then Ukraine started hemorrhaging goodwill within Africa's capitals. So they are now in a position where the war or their position on the issue is no longer popular on social media among everyday Africans. Neither is it popular among African leaders. So they are in a very difficult position, and I believe if we even have a rerun of that UNGA session with the same declaration, you will find that more African countries will even vote against or abstain. So it's a poor approach to diplomacy.
I want to talk about something that you raised, the issue of international law, and earlier on I suggested, is it unprecedented? Has there been anywhere in history where a country could call on the citizens of another, whether residing or in their country or not, to join a war that would effectively not be their own? But secondly, we know that a great deal of this has been placed on the issue of the red line. NATO points to Article 5 of the mandate for its existence. But just, you mentioned that the double standards in the interpretation of why it shouldn't do that. But just in terms of war, what does international law tell us? Nigeria, the government refers to the use of mercenaries in its interpretation of what is happening here. What precedence is there legally in international law?
Well, for the question of international solidarity has always been one of the objectives of diplomacy of any country at war. So what you will find is when a country feels that it has a lot of goodwill around the world, what they tend to do is reach out to citizens all over the world, or their own citizens and citizens of other countries across the world, to ask for support. And depending on the circumstances in the home country and even the laws in the home country, like a country like Brazil, it is very, very clear. You can't, you can't have this type of recruitment. On some countries, for some countries like in America or in Western Europe, you find that they've been very free and very lax about it, because for this type of issue that is very divisive and very contentious, national law tends to take precedence. And even Nigeria as a country, we have our own problems, right? Many African countries have their own problems. You haven't seen the DRC or Mozambique, for instance, reach out to citizens of other countries to come use as a cannon fodder for their insurgency. What they do, you reach out to the government, because it's supposed to be a state-to-state relationship. So going into countries and incentivizing people with money to get them to come fight is a form of exploitation, because it is the money that will attract Africans or Nigerians in particular, or Senegalese, to go over to Ukraine. They don't feel any solidarity towards Ukrainians. I mean, they are not Ukrainians, and Nigeria nor Senegal or any African country is not treaty bound like maybe some other countries around Ukraine they might be treaty bound to support. So what the Ukrainian government would have done is perhaps reach out to countries on a state-to-state or bilateral basis, not over jumping across over the heads of our governments, to reach out to citizens they know would be motivated by the cash offering. So, like I said, it's a very, very been a very counterproductive initiative, and there's no legal justification or treaty binding that demands African countries to fight for Ukraine. No, our part of our oath of allegiance or citizenship requirement does not give us that level of responsibility. So right. It has to be the government sending their own troops if they want to.
Okay, I actually wanted to ask you another question, but because you've just raised that if a government wants to, and I want to use the Great Lakes region as an example, that conflict has been going on for a long time, and partly because of the presence of citizens or the shared should I say, ethnicity of some of those who have been involved in the conflict being used as justification for entering the soil of another country or not. So what lessons are there to learn for something like that? Because I still go back to what Nigeria says is the use of mercenaries. And a lot of people who be critical of the high levels and numbers of conflict in Africa would say, but you have tolerated that. In fact, you've used this to install your own preferred governments or been manipulated into it.
Yeah, so when we look at Africa's own regional conflicts, right, we have been very responsible in terms of how we recruit from other, sort of like inspire allyship. African governments, like they should, tend to reach out to their peers and ask for support. You will not find the kind of open declaration that Ukraine has done on the continent. Nigeria, in all its problems we're facing in the Lake Chad Basin region or even across the Sahel, you will not find these governments reaching out to say that even they need mercenaries, because where are you going to get them from? I mean, the ordinary citizens are not well trained, they're not battle hardened. Trying to get these people to go face a professional and a very industrialized army like the Russians is essentially, paying people to just use them as cannon fodder. So, for instance, when the Malian government wanted to enlist mercenaries to support its own military, it reached out to a professional military. The Sierra Leone government did it way back with executive outcomes. Like, you cannot use people in the way that the Ukrainian government was trying to do. If anything, the Ukrainian government should be condemned for what it's doing, regardless of whatever position we hold on the issue, whether you are supportive of the Ukrainian government or you're supportive of Russia. What I actually expected from the international community, so-called international community, was a condemnation of what Ukraine is trying to do and is still doing, because in certain parts of the world, the people are actually taking them up on the initiative. So. But that's left for individual respective governments, to decide. So for us here in Africa, in African countries, our governments are clear on the issue, and it is very important that citizens, listen to what their governments are saying, because you are not at the level to understand the consequences and some of the big power plays that is currently happening.
All right, it's a pity we have run out of time, because I wanted to ask about the Nigerian government or any other government's country responsibility to their citizens who are stuck in a conflict situation. But a conversation for another time. Thank you so much, Ovigwe Eguegu, who is an international geopolitical security analyst who speaks to us from Abuja in Nigeria.